We're going to continue talking about the family for a couple more weeks and some different aspects of it. But today, I want to talk about our individual role in the family. That's each of us. Okay? And I'm not going to break down mom, dad, brother, sister, child. I just want to break down what it should look like from an overarching perspective of our role within the family. Okay? And remember, as we go through this, I'm not talking about just our physical family at home. I am talking about that, but also our church family. Wherever we go, that we consider people to be family. And some of you are sitting in your pew going, well, I don't consider anybody here family. I don't know what you're talking about, but that's okay. We'll get there. I'll force it down your throat one way or another. That was a joke. It's okay. Wow. I'm going to have to bust out the snakes here in a minute. Jeez. You guys are tough. All right. So, you can pretty much guess where we're going from the title. You can't do it all. Talking about being overwhelmed. Talking about what we do in life. That we make these schedules. And we do these things in life. And we feel our time to the point that we say we have no time. Well, I want to do something real fast. And I want you to read this. This is where we're going to end. Okay? I'm going to give you the ending to start with. God gives us contentment, not our success in a checked-off task list. God gives us contentment, not our successes in doing the things that we checked off each and every day. That contentment comes from only one place. So as we start, I want to start with a section of Proverbs that I have used in many funeral sermons for women who lived a very Christian life, who were servants at heart. Okay, and we all know some of those ladies who have gone on that's what they did. They spent their life serving. And so I have used all of chapter 31 in Proverbs in that time, but I want to read just the middle part of it, starting with verse 13. It says, "She selects wool and flax and works eager with hands. She is like the merchant ships bringing her food from afar. She gets up while it is still night. She provides food for her family and portions for her female servants. She considers a field and buys it. Out of her earnings she plants a vineyard. She sets about her work vigorously. Her arms are strong for her task. She sees that her trading is profitable, and her lamp does not go out at night. In her hand she holds the distaff and grasps the spindles with her fingers. She opens her arms to the poor and extends her hands to the needy." Describes the perfect woman if you read all of chapter 31. Her husband adores her. She waits on him hand and foot. Perfect woman. You guys are tough today. Jeez. Some of you women are like, quit it. Stop it. She conducts business outside of her home, manages her family at the same time. She's involved in ministries to the poor. She's wise, dignified, spiritual. She gets up before dawn and gives the impression she never sleeps. She's a supermom. There's many women who hate this passage, and the reason being is how can a normal human being ever measure up to all of this? Especially when you're a Christian and you aim high in life. It's a story about a day in Boston, Massachusetts, and it was probably a little over 100 years ago now. And many residents went outdoors to enjoy the warmth. It's probably just like the weather we had this week, probably pretty warm. Some spread their lunches in the shadow of the massive Purity Distilling Corporation's molasses tank. This steel structure was 50 feet high, 90 feet in diameter, and on that day it was nearly filled to the top with 2.3 millions of gallons of molasses. And suddenly there was a sound like a machine gun fire. If any of you have ever been around a silo that has burst, you know exactly what's coming next. As the rivets holding the tank together began to pop off. With a roar, the weakened seam split open and tons of sticky fluid spread out. A tsunami of molasses up to 25 feet tall roared down Commercial Street at 35 miles an hour, destroying everything in its path. Several people were lost in the stickiness, but then the suddenness with which the tank burst caused pieces of metal to fly through the air like shrapnel. One piece sliced through a pillar of the Boston Elevated Railway, causing it to collapse. After the flood of molasses subsided, it clogged the streets up to 3 feet deep in places. Some survivors had to have their clothes cut off to get free. Trapped horses had to be put down. The death toll from this reached 21, with more than 150 injured. They say the whole city of Boston was sticky for weeks. It probably won't be molasses, but there's going to come points in everyone's life where you feel stuck. Stuck in a rut, stuck in a low place, but just stuck. Trapped, overwhelmed, can't breathe. And it's scriptures like the one we just read that cause part of this. I'm not saying this scripture is wrong, I'm not saying it's bad, but it causes things like this. It causes anxiety because we're not living up to that standard. We're failing. So the pressures get heavy, the expectation's too high, and you realize you can't do it all. So how much should you be expected to do? In a family role, in life setting, how much should you be expected to do? Are there natural limits to our accomplishments and endeavors? And since many Christians feel stressed out or inadequate, I think we really got to look at God's perspective on all this. Because we as society can put a heavy burden and a heavy toll on people really easily. We like to do it. And so when you talk to people and they begin to feel overwhelmed, what's their first excuse? I don't have enough. Well, let's lay that one to rest real fast. Guys, days have been 24 hours since the beginning. They've been 24 hours long. We have revolved around the sun at the same pace, and the earth has spun at the same pace. It has never, ever changed. It may seem like you don't have enough time, but time has never changed. We've always had 24-hour days. It's actually like 23 point something, but we've always had 24-hour days. Experts say the pressure for all this was worse in the past. That we don't actually work as much as we think we do. But we like to complain about it more now. There's a time expert, as he called himself, Harry Bowser, or as people call him. His studies show people are actually working less and relaxing more. He says the biggest difference is we think we are working more. Instead, we allow our time to be taken up by non-essential things. We rush home from work, we pop our dinner in the microwave, and then we have to watch Modern Family and several other shows for the next 4 hours. It's not really the example of a frantic lifestyle, but it's our life, and we're out of time. Am I knocking the TV? No, I have my shows I like to watch. My wife has her shows she likes to watch. But when we say we have too little time or there's not enough time in the day, what I need you to start beginning to do is to step back and let's begin to look at the choices that we make each and every day. The choices we're making are how we're filling our time and what we're doing with that time. Most of the time you will not hear me say that I did not have enough time from Friday through Sunday to do something. Especially during football season, because I know I fill a lot of time watching football. You can ask me pretty much about any college football game yesterday, and I can probably tell you exactly what happened in that game. Okay? I know most of you don't want to talk about any of the games yesterday, but, well, sorry. I wasn't going to make a joke. I'm sorry. Dang it. I really wasn't. I debated even wearing my OSU tie because I didn't want to offend anybody. Thanks, Debbie. Anyway, I'm on a roll today. But we go through life and we make these choices, and we have too many of them. Because first off, often we're finding ourselves filling our life with unrealistic expectations. This is the biggest one to me. Out of the rest of this sermon, this is the biggest thing to me. That we fill our life with unrealistic expectations. We try to attain what we think God expects of us, but we also try to match the standards that our society promotes to us. I want you to know something, that for the most part, our society and what God expects of us are on two different wavelengths right now. And so that's why it becomes an unrealistic expectation. We want to do what God wants us to do, but yet we also want to succeed in the eyes of our friends. And you're trying to put opposites together. Because the American dream, as of right now, the idealistic thing of our friends and our companies, is so far from what God ever expected of us. Power and money have never come into the equation with God. Ever. Ever. Since the time that scripture was written, power and money have been the causes of people's downfall. God, Christ, and Paul warn over and over in the New Testament that if you've got money and you've got power, you're going to have a rough life trying to maintain all of that and still serve God. Because it becomes tough. They don't say it's not possible. Now they give some pretty good things that say it's pretty tough, like passing a camel through the eye of a needle. I haven't seen it done yet, but I've seen people with money succeed in the kingdom of God. So, if that's possible, here's what I want you to understand. Unrealistic expectations, bringing our society and God together and saying, I can please both to the fullest of my ability and still succeed. I think you're bringing upon yourself a lot of pain and hurt. And you're going to make it rough on yourself. So, a well-ordered house, happy kids who excel at school and sports, and a spouse who is enamored with us. You can't do it all, so what do you leave out of those unrealistic expectations? Well, that's when we take those and we consider them with a critical eye. There's some things you have to do. If you want to eat, you've got to work to put food on the table. Okay? That has to happen. You can't lock a toddler in their room for 3 hours so that you can read a book. That doesn't have to happen. You have to watch them, feed them, clean them, do the basic tasks for them. Pretty simple things. But the word mandatory, I believe, is negotiable. You should clean your house. Well, I want to tell you right now, my version of a clean house and your version of a clean house probably aren't the same. My house right now is really clean. You want to come over after church for a little while? Great, come on over. It is super clean right now. You're going to walk in and go, this isn't super clean. But to me, yes it is. I got 4 kids and another grown adult staying in my house right now. My house is clean. We're doing good, all right? My version and your version aren't the same. But we're living up to what we believe we can accomplish together and pull it off. It's good for us. There's laundry. There's lots of laundry that still needs to be done. I'm okay with that. We got lots of clothes still to wear too, because my house has way too many clothes. So there are things we should do, though, if able. You know, there are things that we should do, but that mandatory part is negotiable. You know, you should have a clean house. Well, what's clean to you and what's clean to me is different. Mandatory is negotiable when it comes to this. But there are things, like I said, that we should do if able. You know, probably most people have big jobs they have to do around their house. They have to be done someday. But as every guy who has a honey-do list knows, you can put those off a couple days, weeks, maybe even years. But you only can assess the balance of the stress of the incomplete task with the aggravation of doing them. So by this not being done, what's it hindering me? By getting done, how much is it going to aggravate me to get it done? You have to balance these things for your life, for the well-being of who You are. Then there are things that are nice, but not necessary. Everyone enjoys a bike ride or a picnic or a special trip to the city, hanging out with friends. They can be enjoyable, they can be educational, and they can be bonding time with the people you love, but they're not necessary. These things are not frivolous, but none of them have to be done. It's just if you never do them, you go crazy. So you got to have some of that. But we fill our life with all these choices, and we think we have to accomplish all of them. And we forget to negotiate this part or that part, and we forget point number 2 right here, to consider our obligations with a critical eye. Nobody wants to critique their own schedule. But when you begin to do that, you begin to analyze your role in what we call life. No one has to do everything. I had a 10-year-old when I lived in Arnett. Looked at her mom and said, "Mom, I need one more thing before I go to bed." Her name was Ashton. And Shane said, "Sure, make it quick." A few minutes later, Ashton showed up, gave her mom a hand drawn grid, said the days of the week were written in perfect 5th grade cursive. And she said, "This is my schedule and I'm stressed out." You can ask Amber, if you know Ashton and you know their family, this family was always on the go. But she said, "I have no free time." It was her daughter's voice, but did she hear it right? My schedule, stressed out. These things just come from a child's mouth. So she ran her fingers over the squares, basketball, piano lessons, daily practices, art. And Shane realized that all her kids had schedules like this, her other daughter too. No wonder their lives were hectic. So they began to discuss, what can we cut out? What can we get rid of? And so they cut a couple things, a couple different lessons she was taking, and it freed her schedule up to be home on Tuesdays and Fridays for just hanging out with Mom and Dad. She said, "I noticed the relief on Ashton's face immediately. If you want my opinion, doing fewer things better beats doing many things poorly and being stressed out anyway. Solomon writes in Ecclesiastes 2, "Better one handful with tranquility than 2 handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind." So perhaps we all could do better what really needs to be done. Everyone has coping mechanisms that waste time. Everyone's got it. Do I know how I cope when being stressed out? I sit down at my computer and normally play some silly game. I know it's an absolute waste of time. So you can ask my wife, there's times I come home, and I sit down for like an hour or 2, and she just goes, "You better?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm good." But it was a complete waste of time. I know it was. I accomplished absolutely nothing around the house with my kids. It was all for me. But take a moment to assess your life and where you want to succeed, and then focus on that. Prune other things. Begin to prune those things away so that you can establish priorities. This is probably the toughest thing in a young adult's life, in a kid's life, and I don't think this ever goes away, is establishing priorities. What do we put first? Okay? And I know that the good Christian answer is here that I need to tell you, you put God first, and then you put family first. I don't want to break that list down. Okay? Because we're not talking about the priority of God right now. That needs to be in every family. We started this family's foundation right there, that the foundation should be God. Okay? I'm talking about the priorities after that. Once you've got that in line, establish priorities. I think this is one of the things that parents have to be proactive on. We kind of mentioned that last week. But you have to establish your priorities. Look at your big jobs and their importance. Where does God fit into those priorities? Because the next part is that you control your attitude from there. You control your attitude from there. You can focus on what never gets done, and you can focus on what is accomplished. There are going to be things in our lives that we fail at finishing. It's going to happen. Do you focus on that? Do you linger on that? Do you beat yourself up because you couldn't finish that task? Or do you focus on what gets accomplished? I'll be honest. Let's be honest for a minute. In my time of ministry, there have been people that have walked out of the churches I have been in. Okay? If I hung my head on the fact that they don't get me wrong, I don't just let them walk away like, all right, see ya, peace, I'm glad we don't get along. But if I hung my head on every one of those that's ever left and never focused on the good that God is accomplishing elsewhere, what good would I be as a preacher? That is one of the tough facts I had to realize very early in life, is that not everybody is going to like who I am. Now then, you hope that people don't sit in churches just for the minister, that there are other things there for them. But there are people who are not going to like me. I do my best to be a likable person. I try to be a loving guy, but there are people that aren't going to like you. There are tasks in your life that are not going to get accomplished. Do we linger? Do we hang our head? Do we beat ourselves up? Do we kick the dirt and call it quits because we failed at one thing? No. Absolutely not. You focused on what is getting accomplished. You know what I've learned a lot in my life is that when you focus on what is getting accomplished, the things that you didn't think were getting done, get done somehow. I'm not talking about the honey-do list you have at home. Just because you took out the trash, the cabinets aren't going to get wiped off, all right? It doesn't happen like that. How about the bigger priorities here? I'll give you an example. In Viceside, I had a family, the Kent family, who Amber and I became very close with. Tammy cut my hair most of the time. She watched the kids occasionally. We became very good friends with them. I actually still communicate with them a lot. Okay? I made it my goal that I was going to get the Kent family in church, one way or another. I had Tammy volunteering at our dinners and funeral stuff around there. Still would not step foot in that church. Couldn't do it. And I was not understanding why. And I sat down with Doug, which you'll probably need to meet Doug in a couple weeks. I keep talking about they're going to come up. I was like, Doug, I am failing. I cannot accomplish. He's like, Jake, what about so-and-so? What about so-and-so? What about... I just started to list all these people I thought were coming to church that hadn't been there before. I'm like, that's not who I'm focused on. He goes, exactly, you're missing the point. You're so focused on them that you're missing what's really going on here. He said, God is doing some incredible things, but you're stuck on this one thing. It's what happens when we get focused on the stuff that we can't do and not focus on the stuff we can do. So we begin to let God mold our attitude. A number of years ago, there's a submarine that went underwater. And it was under there for several days for their testing. And in the meantime, a hurricane had passed over the top of it. And they come up, and they get back to land. The captain looks at it and says, how bad did the storm affect you? It was what storm? So we didn't even notice it. When you find yourself so deeply rooted in faith, things can pass you by, and you never even notice that they were troublesome or hurting. Because of how deeply rooted you are with God. It's because you begin to let Him mold your attitude in the midst of all these things. That when you do feel overwhelmed, you do feel stressed out, that you don't turn to that list and start knocking things out left and right because you can do this. You turn to God and say, hey, I need help. Help me sort this out. Help me figure out what I'm doing wrong. Help me figure out my priorities. Help me to understand that there is a difference in living and living well. There is a difference in being truly happy and being happy. There's a difference in pleasing God and pleasing people. If you know me very well, I'm not a people pleaser. If you couldn't tell about my people leaving the church sometimes, I'm not a people pleaser. I probably should be more of one as a preacher, but I'm not. I try my best to find value in God and what God finds in me. And if I truly seek that, I firmly believe that the value I hold within people will grow. I have the same thoughts about church. That, yes, I'm the minister and I'm asked to come in and try to help a church grow and grow into the future, but I can't do that alone. That if I educate and bring forth the gospel into the people of the church and they grow spiritually, the church is going to grow from that just because the people are growing. God's attitude within us is a major thing. So if you want to break down Scripture for just a minute, you want to talk about somebody that was overwhelmed, let's talk about God for a minute. He created man. He looked at man and said, man needs a companion. Created woman. And then he looked at the couple and said, hey, this is very good. I've done something awesome here. Now let's see what they can do. So he puts man in the garden and says, man, go, do, name the animals. Just stay away from that tree over there. That's the only request I have for you. So life seems pretty simple at this point, right? So man says no. And goes and eats apple. And now God goes, okay, out you go. Let's try this again. Now there's going to be consequences. And so man grows and multiplies, and man utterly turns back on God. And God looks through the world and finds one man and his family worthy of keeping. All of God's creation had turned their back to the point that God found one man and his family worthy of keeping. You want to talk about overwhelmed for just a moment. Look at your belongings. Look at the things you own. Look at the things you have made in life. And take it down to one thing. How overwhelmingly of a task have I just put you on? To shut your life down to one thing. Some of you are like, my wife, got my husband, I'm good. Really? Really? That's what God had to do at this moment. Take all of His creation and shut it down. And so He puts Noah on a boat. And He does just that. The king of being overwhelmed. The king of being swamped. It's the one who wants to mold your attitude to be able to handle it. You know, as we in a farming community and we get close to harvest, you want to talk about feeling overwhelmed. It's a big time of the year for a lot of people. A lot of things get put on hold while this happens and this goes down. Why? Because it has to. This is one of those necessities. This is what puts food on tables. This is what makes life go round in this community. But I want to ask you to do a favor. Don't forget the one that allowed that crop to grow from that ground. stop and take a moment each and every day, just a moment to remember what He's doing for you. Because the contentment comes from Him. Being content and happy with what you have comes from Him. The resentment that you don't have what so-and-so has, that's not part of His kingdom. The contentment with what you have comes from God and allowing Him to mold your attitude. I'm not a big list maker. My wife is, on the other hand. So I don't make these lists of things that's got to be done. But my wife does. And there's been times I'll pick up those lists. I'm like, do you really got to do this? Well, yeah, like, why? And you ask her. It's happened several times. Like, you don't have to do that. Skip that one, come back to it. We can get that done later if we really need to. That doesn't have to be done right here. You know, we're the king of having company over and hiding mess rather than actually getting mess clean, because we're, that part doesn't really have to be done. See, look, blanket. Okay, it's not that bad. Just some of you are like, what is he doing to our house? It's not that bad. My point is that we make these lists and we think we've got to check them off from step 1 through step 10. The contentment that we seek in life doesn't come from succeeding in our top 10s. It comes from succeeding in the eyes of God. It comes from valuing what He values in life. It comes from being a part of His service and His gospel message. It comes from reveling in His love and spreading that news. Because as I've noticed in life, and I'm only 30, and I'm not very good at it all the time, but what I've noticed in life is that as you run through those things, the list begins to check itself off. Those things just begin to get done. And it's amazing. And most of the time you end up doing them, but God just puts you in a place at a time. It's like, hey, a little less stress, let's do some of this. Let's knock out your to-do list so that you can get back to serving me. I don't think this ever stops. We talk about kids right now and all the choices they have to make in school and all these different things they can do in school. And while my kids aren't in here, I'll tell you this. My kids didn't even know that you play rec soccer. Man, I'm a terrible parent, aren't I? No, my kids have enough other stuff to do right now. I don't need the rec soccer. I don't think they need that extra thing. I'm glad you guys play soccer. I'll probably be there to watch some of the kids play. But I don't think my kids need that. So that little green slip went in the trash. Because we tie our kids up with so much stuff. And then we look at them and go, hey, why aren't you on a youth group tonight? Pile of books and jerseys next to them. Oh, now I know. That never stops, though. We talk about it with our kids. That never stops. I don't care what age you've reached in life, you still find yourself overwhelmed by the things you take on, the things you choose to do. Guys, contentment doesn't come from those things. Contentment, being truly happy, comes from God. Solomon goes through the whole book of Ecclesiastes. And I call this the merry-go-round book. Because if you get on, you ride the ride, you get off in the same exact place you got on. Solomon starts by talking about the wisdom of God and who God is. And then he goes through his life of all the things that he's accomplished. Meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Is quoted in Ecclesiastes. And what he's talking about is that everything under the sun, there's a time, there's a place for all to happen. But he says, at the end of life, at the end of my time, what I realized was that I was to fear God and keep His commandments, that the rest would just happen. Meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. That all these things we do in life without God are nothing. That no matter what we choose, no matter how much we surround ourselves, without God, they are nothing. There's no trailer hitch on a hearse. You can't take any of it with you. I've been in it. We'll close with a funny story for you. There's a man who went his whole life acquiring riches. He got very wealthy. And he told his wife, he said, when I die, I want you to bury me with my money. She said, well, that's not really fair. Didn't we do this together? And he said, no, my money. And he hands her a book. He kept tally of everything that he had made in his life. And he said, so this is what I have right now. And I want you to bury me with it. So funeral time comes after he passes. She lays him in his casket, puts the money in there with him, puts him in the ground. A couple days later, she sees one of her friends and says, did you really do that? Did you really put his money with him? Did you really give him what he wanted? I mean, he's gone. He's not going to know. She's like, yes, I did. She's like, when he passed away, I gathered all of his money together, I put it in my bank account, and I wrote him a check. Our contentment comes from God, not anything we find here on earth. And I think as we go through life overwhelmed, we have to begin to understand that more and more. We have to seek God for contentment. Not our earthly desires, not our fleshly desires, but God. Let's have a closing word prayer. Father God, we thank you so much again for this wonderful time to be in your house. We thank you that we get to come together to celebrate as a family. And now, Father, we just ask as we look at our personal roles in our family, and as we go through times in our life and we feel overwhelmed, that you help us to seek our contentment in you, to find the pride and joy in the things that you would have us find pride and joy in, Father. It's in your Son's name we pray. Amen.